Grace to you and peace, friends, on this first Sunday of Advent. It's lovely to welcome you. We're beginning a new church year today. We will now this year be hearing predominantly from the Gospel of Mark, probably the first Gospel written, the briefest Gospel, a Gospel that has a breathless urgency about it. I do love the Gospel of Mark, so I'm glad that we will be able to explore the Gospel in quite some depth on these coming Sundays when I preach on the Gospel. Today's Gospel reading is not from the beginning of Mark, as you would expect. That's for next week. For this week, we have a reading from Mark 13. The verses are 24 to 37. So Mark 13, 24 to 37. And if you haven't read that yet and would like to, you can go ahead and pause me and do that now. When I was little, I loved looking at the stars in the night sky. All those pinpoints of light in the dark sky seemed so beautiful. And here's the thing, they were the same every night. Aside from seasonal shifting in the sky, they were always the same. Whether I'd had a good day or a bad day, they were always the same. I didn't know much about constellations, but I loved learning how to find the Big Dipper. For once I knew how to find it, I knew I could always find it, even at different times of the year. One night I was looking up and I thought, those are the same stars that ancient people saw, in the same configuration. Plato saw the same stars, Cleopatra saw the same stars, Jesus saw the very same stars when he looked up at the night sky too. And there was something very comforting in that, and there still is. When I was feeling down, or things were not going well, I just remembered the stars. They were still there. Well, in the gospel reading for today, Jesus imagines a time when the stars are no longer there. And he imagines that as a metaphor for when things go terribly, terribly wrong in the world. A time when you look up and the stars are not where they are supposed to be, but a time rather when the stars fall from the sky and nothing is the same as it was. A time of crisis, a time when the stars fall. The stars fall in every generation, I guess, and the stars fall in the lives of each one of us. Whether it is the loss of a job, the death of someone close to us, a divorce, physical or mental illness, a public embarrassment, or a failure. Those are the times when it seems as if the stars have fallen, and it's very, very disorienting. We look to the stars, but it is almost as if they have fallen from the sky. Well, the good news, Jesus says in the gospel reading this morning, is this. When these things happen, when it seems as if the stars fall from the sky, that is a sign that he is coming to us now. When those things happen, says Jesus, when the stars fall is when you will see me coming, and I will gather you all together, and I will be near, so be watchful, and I will come. I learned something about this passage since the last time I preached on it. This chapter of Mark 13, is sometimes called Mark's Apocalypse, and it comes just shortly before Jesus goes to his trial and death. Now, it's sometimes called Mark's Apocalypse. Now, apocalypse means unveiling or revealing or uncovering. And in the Bible, an apocalypse was a type of literature often written during times of crisis. And it was written, an apocalypse would have been written to reveal or uncover that despite present circumstances and current suffering, God was still in charge and working for a final good resolution to all things. An apocalypse offered an assurance that evil would ultimately be judged and banished forever. So apocalypse was written in response to a time of crisis. Now, in Mark's context, writing about 40 years after Jesus was crucified, around the year 70, maybe shortly after, in Mark's context, the crisis he was addressing with Jesus' words was likely the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem by the Romans in 70 CE. This event caused considerable trauma for the people. It called into question divine goodness. It called into question God's sovereignty. People wondered how they could ever again count on God, continue in faith, and gather for worship. Since the temple was considered to be God's dwelling place on earth, its destruction felt as if the stars had indeed fallen. Now, usually, if you look at other apocalypses, an apocalypse would first announce God's coming arrival into the crisis, followed by second, a description of the cosmic disturbances, followed thirdly by judgment and salvation. So God's coming, cosmic disturbances, judgment and salvation. Mark, however, changes what a person would expect to find in an apocalypse. For one thing, God's arrival in the form of the Son of Man comes after the cosmic disturbances. It is as if Mark understands that God does not create chaos but comes in response to it. For another thing, there is no judgment in Mark's apocalypse. The typical judgment scene is replaced in Mark's gospel with something very different. The Son of Man comes in response to the chaos and then graciously gathers those whom he cares about. There's a gathering of peoples. Nothing is said about judgment or separating the sheep from the goats, like we heard last week in Matthew's gospel. Far from being about separating, Mark understands God's plan to be about gathering. In conversation with one of you this week, you wrote to me saying this: I know this must be the worst scenario for ministry for you. You really are all about the people, and right now, the people are all separated, the actual complete opposite of the divine plan, I must say. It is the complete opposite, which is surely why so many of us feel so disoriented in this time of separation and distancing. And it feels like the stars have indeed fallen from the sky. Way back in Genesis 2, right? It says, it is not good, God says, it is not good for the earth creature, the human being, to be alone. Separation is not what we are made for, but gathering is. We must hang on to that promise that Jesus will gather us all together again, and we must watch for Jesus coming to us in the midst of crisis and chaos, as he has promised. In the middle of this gospel reading, Jesus tells a story, right? About a man who went on a trip and left his servants in charge. Each is given a job to do, but they are not told when the man will return. The man just tells the doorkeeper, be alert, be watchful. The rest of the staff are simply to keep on doing the jobs they've been given. Well, as we await for Christ's final return, when all will finally be restored and we will all be perfectly and finally gathered all together, we too have jobs to do that Jesus is telling us to keep on doing. To heal and bind up broken hearts, to feed the hungry, to speak against injustice and forgive the wrongdoer, to pray and give thanks, to connect with the lonely, to share the manna we've been given, to do whatever task we are about in our jobs or in school or in our homes, with our eye always on the common good of all people. Because these things are the ways in which Jesus comes in the present. We are called to be alert and to be awake to the many ways in which Jesus appears and comes in the present time. For Advent means coming. Literally, it means coming. And on this first Sunday in Advent, we are being called by Mark to watch for the ways in which Jesus comes even now. Right now, we are waiting for Jesus' first Advent or first coming at Christmas time, right? That we're remembering back to the time when Jesus first came at Christmas time. And we can take something away from the way in which Jesus came that first time. That first Advent or coming of Jesus was kind of unremarkable, right? Jesus came to us as a small child, born in poverty, to very humble parents, in an out-of-the-way place, in an out-of-the-way province of the Roman Empire. So if this is how Jesus first came, so unobtrusively and so beautifully, in how many other ways does he come even now, unobtrusively and beautifully, until his final appearing and the fulfillment of all things? Watch and be alert for them. Jesus comes, Jesus always comes, in the crisis, when the stars fall. For it is in every act of love, no matter how small, that Jesus comes. In a phone call, Jesus comes. In food given, Jesus comes. In a word of encouragement, Jesus comes. In all these unobtrusive and beautiful ways and countless more, Jesus comes near to us in crisis. And finally, beyond the crisis, Jesus will come and gather us together as he has promised, for that is the divine plan. So be alert, stay watchful, keep awake to the wonder of love, for when the stars fall, Jesus is near. Amen. Thank you for joining me once again. Friends, keep well, be alert, stay watchful. We can have hope. Jesus is near. Until next time, may God be with you.